This is the sharing of the 26th of July, 2025. We are here in Ajustrel, Fátima, Portugal, in the new format of sharings. We will offer being present in some recordings in some environments that have a special vibration that may help us in our inner opening. And someone has asked the meaning of the public lectures, why they exist, what public do they target. You see, I arrived at Figueira right after its foundation, and I had the opportunity to accompany the expansion of the work from the beginning and live near Trigueirinho for a few years at different moments. Until a certain point in 25, 26, we started to prepare me to give some continuity and complement what had been given and done as instruction. So it's not a matter of reformatting or representing it in the old model, but to help so that we may experience this instruction. So the questions, the dreams, even if you have some topic of the interest of contemporary life or inner life or subjective life, ask in the chat or maybe in a coming sharing, we may consider studying them. And And the meaning of public lectures is also to collaborate, supporting, helping, so that we may understand better than interpret in a more mature inner and peaceful way what happens to us in such a disturbed time of so much interference and hostility, a time in which we have a strong tendency to mix what comes from outside with what happens within us. And this may disturb our process of seeking spiritual life a lot. So, this is also a reason for us to offer this content. The impulse of today is spiritual realities of today. So, throughout this reflection, let's address what realities are and what we understand as spiritual, which are two words that are used in many contexts with other words, such as the word love, the word problem, the word test, the word evolution. They are words that can be used in many different contexts. And again, they may confuse our process a little bit. So, what do we refer to as spiritual realities of today? And what is today? What does it refer to? We are living a moment that is quite peculiar, which began in 1988 with what we call the activation of human monads. So, at the beginning of the year, when we studied the esoteric glossary, we we paid a lot of attention in a very didactic way to the levels of consciousness. And remember, in our inner life, in our higher and invisible world, we are a spirit. We exist in the other dimensions. And even though humanity has made many incursions through groups, ashrams, great religions, individual efforts of hermits, such as Mount Athos and other situations in the Himalayas, in the Tibet also. Humanity as a whole was not open or available or ready or even awakened to their inner level. So, considering that humanity is a part of the life of the planet, at that moment in 1988, according to a calendar that we do not know, we do not have the means to calculate and understand the reasons for that. The inner beings that accompany the evolution of the planet determine the beginning of a fundamental stage on the planet. So, this represents the awakening of human monads and a hierarchy that we know as Astaras Gran, a great hierarchy. This hierarchy made this ceremony and promoted in the spiritual plane of humanity the awakening of our souls. And what does the awakening of our soul means, or the awakening of our spirit? It means that this level would be not only polarized in the incarnations and lower planes, but it would start to, depending on its degree of evolution, to glimpse cosmic life, to start receiving impulses and evolutionary streams that are different from those it had been accustomed to before. This changes the kind of impact that that targets our soul, our inner soul, and our human consciousness. The result of this, the immediate result of this, is that the human being, all of us, start, even if we have never before, in this incarnation at least, any interest in abstract interest, we start to have some kind of opening, so to say, an interest also for what is spiritual, super physical, and less concrete, both what is concrete and what is abstract also. This stage was also characterized by the beginning of the application of a universal law, which is called law of purification. So we have the sun of our solar system, and the moment the monads and human spirits start receiving other streams and immaterial currents, it's necessary to equip this being to a whole set of circumstances so that humanity and the planet and our bodies could also gradually adapt and adjust to this new situation. So this is the way that law of purification began as a planet had the beginning of its application on the planet. And let's reflect about this. The logos of the planet is very old and quite oriented to the tendency to sacrifice, not sacrifice as we humanly use the word, but sacrifice from the point of view of very evolved consciousnesses that sacrifice their consciousnesses to receive in the aura of the inner levels on which this consciousness is polarized to receive erring forces, evolutionary forces, so that they may also find again the path of light. And I make another comment. In creation, there are two very determining cycles. The evolutionary arc, when the essences are created from the cosmic bonds and they are projected onto the worlds and the universes, and they have experiences of materialization and an important reinforcement of a feeling of self-identity. Do you follow me? In a certain point, there is a moment of transition and the beginning of the stage of the evolutionary arc, which is called the path of return. So in 1988, a hierarchy from the planetary center of Earth, Argentina, approached Trigueirinho, presenting a proposal of work proposing the law of return, this moment of the evolution of the planet and humanity, and all that this transition would represent. And that's where we are. So, returning to the topic of the central sun of the galaxy, some channels were opened, and through this alignment with the central sun, more precise energies and very potent energies began affecting and striking on many levels where these erring energies, evolutionary energies, all those materials that have no consciousness of the whole, they do not have the consciousness, the awareness of the common good, in other words, of God, they continue to work for involution, for dissociation, for chaos, for separateness. They do not see the whole. They are blind forces, involutionary forces. And this is in our physical composition. So when the planetary logos from the beginning, it was all the project of the planet, which is a Christic project, a project of redemption of this great hierarchy, which we call Christ Samana. See the esoteric glossary. So this project of redemption predicts not only the redemption of our spirit, our soul throughout the incarnations, but also of the forces of these elements that comprise the formation of worlds, so that they may experience their purification and repolarize. This caused since 1988 an intensification of conflicts, because to the extent that we were gradually awakening and opening ourselves and creating an acceptance of higher topics, everything in us that is still involutionary, the genetic material, limited material comprised by elements of the planet, atoms that come from a general reservoir, sorry for the word, but very contaminated by these forces. This brings a situation for the human situation that is quite complex, so much so that notice the inner conflict. Each one of our consciousnesses is awakened to a certain degree, and we live as daily clash while living with thoughts, desires, reactions that are really external to what we are really aspiring, and they escape our control. Why? Because we still do not have the expansion of consciousness that can control these reactions and maintain our system, our personality, as whole and completely and exclusively focusing on light. This happens with each one of us. If we study the life of Buddha, the life of Jesus, Saint Teresa of Avila, Padre Pio, we have hundreds of references of people who have gone through this planet, and we see that this clash is our daily bread because of the mingling of the human consciousness and the everyday energies and non-evolutionary energies with the inner life. This purification is quite necessary because we need to adjust so that the spiritual energies of this time of transition, at which we are finalizing, ending the trajectory, the evolutionary arc, and in a transition into the path of return, we have to adjust our inner world and our bodies to these higher states. And without a purification, it's very difficult, or it's more difficult, or at certain point, it's quite frictioning, as we used to say. It also, starting in 1988, brought at first by this consciousness of Saruma, although other groups were also working with a lot of great contents. It was the introduction on the planetary world, the works of Triguerinho and other works about the existence of superphysical existence, which are not objects that we can see with our physical senses. They are called superphysical realities. So just as we have our emotional body, which we do not see, I see some bodies here, I see trees, but I cannot see the etheric level of the tree. I cannot see the more inner aspect of the animals, the trees, of those who are present here. So there is a super physical presence, another kind of composition, which we do not see with our current senses, but we can commune with through its vibration, through its state of consciousness. Many who come here to Fatima, for example, in Ajustrel, at a certain point, they feel protection, they feel a kind of lap, a protected environment with the resumption of something that had been lost for a long time because it's a state of consciousness. The planetary center of Lis Fatima radiates. This was only an example. What do we call spiritual realities? Why did we choose this impulse today? They are those situations or expressions of these inner levels that project themselves onto the aura of the planet on other levels because they are part of the evolution of the planet. So this directly impacts or directly crosses this architecture, all this evolutionary equipment that the planet comprises, which is the logos, the hierarchies, what we call planetary centers, planetary retreats, points of light, superphysical bases, intraoceanic centers, mirrors. There are many superphysical and spiritual situations that are typical of this time. This time for us, has existed for many years, not decades. It has existed for many years, preparing the situation so that at this moment of transition on the planet we could awaken to these spiritual realities, and today we can rescue, recover this bond and accompany the evolution and the step that the planet is taking so that we may gradually become freed from this identification with material life, specially translated as our identification with the movement of our bodies, and start to suspect and awaken and love to a greater degree our inner life. And again, this is the clash of today. Because even with all this love, dedication, and quest, our bodies have acquired throughout many lifetimes a kind of automatic life that is a kind of semi automatic working, this identification with human identity. So our awakening to the spiritual realities of today may mean, or it seems that it really means, way out of this labyrinth in which we find ourselves so often, turning around ourselves around processes that do not progress, do not develop, we do not become liberated. So all the instruction that we have within this work, it moves toward these foundations, our walking towards the self-emptying of all that which is connected to our personality, so that we may gradually remember that higher purpose exists, a sense of life exists for each one of us, and really a whole universe of possibilities that the current civilization not only does not know, but also despises. It's important that this content may touch our inner life and that we may pay attention to this because this is the foundation of what will come in the future in our relationship with the superphysical realities. Because if we do not live this true purification of the human identification and the evolutionary forces in us, these superphysical realities will continue to be imprisoned and in the identification we have with the external circumstances, instead of relating with shopping, shops, etc. We will identify with the superphysical realities, but in a mental way, not in an inner way. It's a matter of awakening at the beginning of the ascendant arc or the love return for our awakening to universal service, our realization that we are a part of something broader in that our consciousness is part of this. Somehow we feel that we are part of this and that we need to contribute to this whole, not something as before our awakening imprisoned to our interests, but rather oriented to the common good so that this whole may gradually rebuild, which is a very long process, rebuilding in the sense of complementing, of creating a unity of the same purpose, which is the expression of creation. We can express this in a very harmonious way. So see how the civilization is so distant from all this. The word reality is also very broad, as I said at the beginning, and used in many contexts because there is a capital letter reality, which is everything that is matricial, the archetypes, that which comprises the matrix, the original idea for the universe, for the world, for a being, for a planet. It's a matrix. And this is a thought in this one mind, and there exists that which is real for each one of us, real for our current evolutionary moment. If we enter these dynamics when we begin our purification, we realize that what was real yesterday has grown and expanded today. We need a broader level of reality to quench our thirst. If we are really aspiring to a higher reality, we'll see it's kind of as if it were moving away from us and it's expanding. Is this unattainable? No, it's attracting us so that we do not become deluded that we have reached at any place. We are just starting the ascending arc. We have a very long trajectory before us in this rising arc. As the spiritual reality of today, from the point of view of the situations of the planet, how do they project themselves? How do we perceive them? As I was saying, we have our higher bodies, we have an inner life, and through the inner life, it's the first portal, the first door, a- and the next door, the next step, that environment through which our state of human consciousness rises through the disidentification with purely human topics, and our inner consciousness starts interacting with all this in a very natural way. It's not something that we will build with our free will or that we have a control over it. We disidentify from the human nature. We gradually become naked, as in the East it was said. In this self emptying, in this purity, we gradually elevate our consciousness, and naturally, all this superphysical reality starts contacting us. But what is the criterion? What accompanies this? What determines what we make contact with? It's an intelligent and necessary question. Each one of us as a soul that goes through the incarnations, as we have studied. We live many experiences on the planet and out of the planet, naturally, and this oscillated between incarnations of awakening, more human incarnations, more spiritual incarnations, and more materialistic incarnations, because that was the learning experience that we had to go through. We gradually touched it and gradually moved away from this reality in different ways, either through our practice, our belongingness to a religion or an ashram, or we had contact with evolved beings that have con- come to the planet to experience and transmit a reality. And this gradually prepared the moment of today, which is a moment of finding again all this in another turn of the spiral, uh, a, a turn of making a synthesis and identifying our next step. And what is the next step? Is that which we have to solve, to redeem, to finish releasing and surrendering, to assume our evolutionary commitment, especially in this final time, not to confuse ourselves with this purification, which promotes clash within us, as I said, because the erring forces that exist in all our bodies and even our consciousness, they clash because some of them do not accept redemption. They do not accept to enter a different kind of experience, and they delay a little bit the process of liberation. So again, how do we reach this super physical contact with this all these realities, and what regulates this? If we all of us here in Fatima, even people who come here or go through this, who may not have any affinity with Mary, with prayer, how do these people receive this code? If these people go to Garabandal or Avila or Lourdes or Montserrat or go through Cordoba, how does this impact humanity as a whole, and how can we participate in this? First of all, what is important is to know where our heart is, where are our intentions, and why do we want to contact these realities? I say this because we, throughout our lifetimes, we go through less luminous stage. I didn't want to use other words, in which we became involved with ritualistic processes to contact all this for our own benefit, personal benefit. So practices of power, occultist power practices, practices of manipulating energies, this blocked our capacity to contact the super physical realities on the point of view of the ascending arc. So today, the hierarchies, consciousnesses, and great divas and archangels, they protect entire regions in these super physical spaces, such as the one called in Pakistan, in Foz do Iguaçu, between Argentina, Paraguay, and Brazil, which has great divas that are very evolved, that accompany and protect the contact with those matrices that this retreat represents and protects. So, what regulates this are the guardian consciousnesses, the consciousness that accompany these spaces and know ourselves deeply, and who will touch us in our inner planes and levels to the extent in the tone, in the content, in the energy that are the least resistance path for each one of us. So if each one of us has a kind of bond with something that is uncertain or is not evolutionary, it'll not be through this way or path that the hierarchy will activate this consciousness, not to expose the person to the temptation of repeating manipulation of to have the illusion that they are manipulating the process. This is important because all of us, in some moment of our evolution, we have had a contact with this because a part of the process of the planet and of the forces that live here. So all of us have lived this. So it's quite needed, quite necessary that we watch where our heart is and what our aspiration is. Because if we mix and if we do not discern our aspiration from ambition, we run the risk of of, of disguising our aspiration ambition as if it were aspiration when a door is not open to us. The higher worlds do not have any key that is not attainable. They are just protected from an ethical point of view, higher ethics, that is like a code of ethics, a pattern of conduct, a state of purity and intention that gradually opens the doors and and the consciousness gradually glimpses this. And many are having contact with these realities, but they do not fixate this reality in their physical brains or in their human consciousness, either because they are not paying attention to this or because they do not love this. The only consciousness that retains this is love, and not the love to retain. The human love has the tendency to try to grab things. Is the love that loves, the love that liberates. I do not want to become the owner of anything that may make contact or may be radiated from these environments to me. I share it with the world. I feel full of gratitude. And you see how this disarms the mechanism of human control. If it doesn't disarm, the consciousness becomes controller. So it becomes the human aspect of ambition does not take any interest in what is higher. So what regulates the contact with all this is our aspiration, our sincere aspiration, first of all, of knowing ourselves. Everything begins with self knowledge. If I'm still not convinced that I'm not only the personality, but that I have an inner life in my higher levels, and that my inner world is much broader and freer, and that in the future, if we can say that, it'll have a horizon of learning that is so much broader than what I have humanly now. Everything else will be limited to this strictly human identity. But if I awaken to all this, and I start having a simpler life, more essential life, that I start dedicating more time to these topics, and start to redimension, resize these values that are within me and outside of me, I will be creating a condition so that the state of consciousness of these super physical realities may approach my consciousness, and what is foreseen for my path will approach my consciousness. I may be here at this moment in the aura of a planetary center of Lis in Arjustrel, and my consciousness, for some reason, may be living a learning of the state of consciousness of Earth, or of Niskalkat, or of Mount Shasta, or of the Lake Titicaca, or in Guatavita in Colombia. They are super physical things. It's not just a geographic thing. They are states of consciousness. Just imagine the freedom that this may bring to us. So for this, naturally, we have to be in a degree of opening. We have to recover faith within us. It's not a trust or belief in someone. It's a faith that connects us to creation. It's that awakening that I was saying at the beginning that places us automatically in a kind of suspicion, an idea, a feeling, a hunch that we are a part of the creation. We may call ourselves the children of God, children of the universe, the way each one of us wants to understand. And as we enter the restatement, reaffirmation of this experience, these consciousnesses that which are so precise and intelligent, they know our spiritual path. Remember, when we studied the esoteric glossary and we made some sharings about the esoteric glossary, we mentioned a hierarchical level called the Lords of Karma. So the Lords of Karma, this level of the hierarchy, which is a kind of guardian, as if they were great guardians of libraries, of our records of experience, both on the planet and outside of the planet in the universe, that accompany our evolutionary process and create the best condition within karma so that we may awaken and live our purification and gradually experience this process of gradually approaching the spiritual realities of today and surrendering to this, allowing this process to take place. The lords of karma will regulate with what, how, when we will make contact with all this. But then, what can we do? Is there anything that is within our grasp, our possibilities that is here within our proactivity that may help this? Yes, as we said at the beginning, this awakening to the inner world, this need for us to be purified, because if we do not recognize, if we do not acknowledge that we need to be purified of even things we are not even aware of that are conflictive, disharmonious, selfish, etc., when this energy of the central sun touches these points that need to be liberated, they will regenerate a liberation and friction, and will generate an inner conflict and also suffering. So, our part in this is the purity of intention, our awakening to this. At first, as I was saying, as we become aware that this is regulated in the good sense, this is accompanied by these great guardians and hierarchies that accompany our evolution, trusting that we'll make contact with this. We have received dreams of people who were making a stroll at one of these places that are called sacred. I have mentioned a few among so many. And the person, without even knowing, they entered the wood of sequoia and redwood in the United States, and they feel something. They perceive they have entered a place that has changed their condition. They go to the black wood of Germany. They feel, even if they do not see anything, they perceive nothing, but they feel they have entered a different condition. So, if we have the aspiration of knowing and communing with these spiritual realities of today, will be deeply helped to redirect our priorities. And, and while we are in the everyday routines that are inevitable, our consciousness, which is not our minds, our mind is a place through which our consciousness goes through and transits through. Our consciousness is something else. Our consciousness is always aspiring to this. I may be here in the external life doing a work with the trees, with the woods, with the stones, with the fountains of water or springs of water, or I may be preparing food or driving. But while my consciousness, my inner world is always attentive to all this, to this reality that is omnipresent, reality that's omnipresent. What exists, for example, in the planetary center of Lys, is being radiated at this moment through this conjuncture here. Am I clear? Not what happens on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and does not exist on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. So the problem is that I cannot bear the communion with this because it doesn't have any connection with our human experience, that does not lead us to a human experience connected to our personal interests. The consciousness cannot become a mirror, an environment of reflection of this inner communion. Again, it's only possible through love for this higher reality. And when we love this, in a way that is not a sentimentalist way, but it's an inner process of identification, as we love this in this higher spiritual passion, everything that is available in our karma will be reaching our consciousness and our inner world. So I may be going through a disease But my consciousness, on some level, if my karma allows me, will be in an overlapping of situation that is also in contact with these realities. Am I clear? So there is a movement that is quite important available to us. These realities have remained hidden, quite hidden from humanity as a whole, from the point of view of our being aware of this and having information about this, because of this tendency of human omission and ambition, even spiritual ambition for the power that these places radiate, because the temptation is quite big of using these energies for personal benefit, including a spiritual personal benefit. So the hierarchies have always been careful to calibrate, to regulate, to calibrate the voltage that reaches each one, which must be in accordance with our opening, our purification, our awakening, and especially in this time, our commitment, the level of our commitment with the evolutionary process. So one of the revelations of the hierarchy was the existence of a plan for humanity, the rescue of a harmonious relationship with the kingdoms of nature. So there is an evolutionary plan. So the first thing that comes together with an awakening is defining again our commitment before this plan. So as the consciousness gradually balances all these relationships, the acceptance of purification, the awakening of this consciousness, the beginning of contact with these superphysical realities, the creation of these realities in our human bodies, whether with prayer, with meditation, with the practice of mantras, with music. Each one has their mechanism, which in many cases come from the universe, and we have to respect this. If they are evolutionary, if they serve us, let's practice them to create a condition to enable our vibration to reach the best possible level, so that this sacrifice, as I was saying, not only of the logos, but of these points of light that exist on the planet, they sacrifice themselves, they project on the more mental, emotional, etheric levels of human life and of the planet. So we gradually identify some energies in our bodies, and our bodies start perceiving all this. This remained hermetic as a protection, as I was saying. Imagine if the revelation that in Montserrat in Barcelona, there is a whole universe and world connected to human rehabilitation. There are superphysical lakes of crystal, of different waters, pure waters that purify the consciousnesses and the evolutionary bodies. Just imagine an ambitious, a greedy human consciousness making contact with these codes and using them in the mental plane to manipulate other beings. This is something very serious from the karmic point of view. So the hierarchy has always maintained this in a very hermetic way, but the time came from 1988 up to now, so that we may become aware of all this, what has changed from what the groups had before, from what is known now, is how much we will gradually assume our evolutionary commitment, and what our next step is, what is the task of each one of us on this plane, on this evolutionary plan, how we interact with the planet, aware that the planet is not only what we are living today. So, for example, everything that is happening in the Middle East and the Sea of Galilee, there is the epicenter of a great retreat of the hierarchy, which we call Galileum. It's the retreat connected to the inner call, the spiritual call. So just imagine the disproportion of the existence of such an important retreat, the retreat of Christ Samana in the first person throughout many cycles, with this kind of inner call that rings within each one, awakening humanity for an evolutionary higher evolution, and as compared to the outer and chaotic situation that is the reflection of the resistance of the involutionary forces in the face of this inner call. So this is a very defining moment that invites us to approach all this, reflect, if it's not now the moment to start loving all this more and more. This love begins, as I was saying, with this disidentification of our human person so that we may gradually identify ourselves with our inner world. And then this same attitude will be the filter or the valve that will gauge our relationship with the planet evolution and evolutionary life. If I insist on an egocentric relationship with ourselves, with myself, I want to relate to the energies in a selfish way. So the process always starts within ourselves. If we change our focus and we start reorganizing ourselves as identity with ourselves, all this universe happens naturally, and the vibration of all these environments that exist here, for example, in Fatima, the spiritual center of Lis Fatima, that radiates to northern Africa, all this arc that goes from the south of Portugal to Ireland. There are many superphysical realities in the Iberic Iberian Peninsula. There is a whole treasure for the planet, and we have no idea of this. We do not love this. France, Italy, Greece. Imagine the treasure that Greece represents, not only historically, but what is behind this. Mount Athos, this point of light, what it has represented and still represents. But all this needs our attention. I'm not encouraging spiritual tourism. Many visit these places and make contact with what their karma allows them to do, but this restricts the radiation that these places could make use of for each one of us, because these vibrations reach us from the opening of our attitude and our intention. If I go to Lourdes only seeking physical healing, if my karma allows me, I receive some impulse to be helped with the healing of Lourdes. But what is in Lourdes is much broader than just a physical, mental, emotional healing. It's much broader than that. So we have really a lot of content to reflect upon about these points of light, these retreats of the hierarchy on the planet. Not all of them, but some of them are mentioned in the Esoteric Glossary, which is a book that presents these realities from a certain point of view. This was deeply expanded in the last 20 years, but in the Esoteric Glossary, it's a good introduction to classical spirituality and the preparation for everything that happened to humanity until 1988 and what is happening to humanity up to now. So the glossary helps us, and is a good work to help us to make contact with all this. The esoteric glossary is a good reference for us to start making a first contact with Eric's Aurora, Minajat, Misitlan, Iskalkat, the levels of consciousness. So all this gradually creates in our human consciousness an interest, a love, an opening for a kind of knowledge that is up to date, the knowledge we need to collaborate with the hierarchy, with those who are accompanying the evolution of the planet and our the evolution of humanity and our evolution in a personal manner, so that we can see ourselves in this global current of evolution and collaboration so that we can appease this movement and to be more useful in this great clash that humanity is going through. So, if anyone has any question about this, dreams or topics that you find they are interest, place them on the chat that will be sent, and I can organize in the coming studies we can develop also. Okay, so thank you. Receive all this radiation from Aljustrel, Fatima, from this harmony of the sunset in Aljustrel. See you on a coming occasion. Thank you very much.